In 1983, Doctor Who celebrated its 20th anniversary. There was a big convention in Longleat, which I was too young to go to. Radio Times published a 20th anniversary special, which was my main source of reference for the show for many years. And in November there was the 5 Doctors, bringing back numerous old faces from the show's past. It's not perfect, but it works much better than the 3 Doctors before it, and it remained my favourite Doctor Who anniversary special until the 50th. Despite the title, only 3 original Doctors appear, but we do see clips from William Hartnell and Tom Baker, so technically they are all in it. This does mean viewers can directly compare William Hurndall's first Doctor to the original, which is rather unfair. His performance is not bad, it's just a bit too much sweet grandpa and not enough crotchety old git. David Bradley's version of the character went in the opposite direction. But neither of them managed to capture the quality that made William Hartnell's Doctor unique. Patrick Troughton returns as the 2nd Doctor, who is no longer travelling with Jamie and Zoe, so an entire theoretical extra season has to be made up to account for his presence. And the 3rd Doctor just shows up riding Bessie. Troughton and Pertwee both slip effortlessly back into their roles, and it's great to see them do their thing one more time. Tom Baker refused to take part, so he's represented by clips from Shudder, which would have felt brand new and exciting at the time. Not so much now that you can watch the whole thing reconstructed on Blu-ray. I guess it was only 2 years since he left the show, so it would be like if they did a multi-Doctor story this year and Jodie Whittaker refused to come back. Nobody would really have been expecting her back so soon. Peter Davison is of course front and centre as the current Doctor. He takes a back seat for the first half, but for the second half he is definitely the lead, travelling to the capital of Gallifrey to uncover the real enemy. These scenes are very much in keeping with Arc of Infinity, all plants and fountains, but sadly Colin Baker did not come back with his big feathery hat, or it would have been 6 Doctors. Alongside the Doctors, we inevitably get companions. Carol Ann Ford comes back as Susan, but none of the Doctors bothers to ask her what she's been up to for the past 20 years. I've always thought it was a missed opportunity, but Terrance Dicks is not really known for his ability to write big emotional scenes, so maybe it's better to assume that they all caught up between scenes. The new series can do that sort of thing so much better, and there's still time for them to do a big episode where the Doctor reunites with Susan. Hopefully they can get Carol Ann Ford to film a regeneration scene for it, at the very least. The 2nd Doctor is paired with the Brigadier, and they make a fine double act. Their chemistry is a joy to watch, even though they were only in a handful of stories together beforehand. And the 3rd Doctor gets to have one more adventure with Sarah Jane Smith. Elizabeth Sladen makes her final appearance until Skrull Reunion, 22 years later. And given they make her wear a terrible outfit and fall down the flattest hill in the Death Zone, it's not hard to see why she didn't come back for so long. You can't help wishing they might have mixed up the pairings a bit. The 1st Doctor has a few scenes with Tegan, but it might have been fun to see the 2nd Doctor with Sarah Jane, or the 3rd Doctor with Susan. I guess they did that sort of thing in Dimensions in Time, and it was just terribly confusing. We also get a bunch of returning monsters. There's just one Dalek, which feels like a bit of a waste, but they haven't been in the show for a few years, so I guess in retrospect it was a good way to preview their return in force in Resurrection of the Daleks the following year. Otherwise, the main threat are the Cybermen, who go after several Doctors, before they themselves are all taken down by the Rastan Warrior robot, which is by far the best action scene in the episode. It might just look like some guy jumping around in a skin-tight leotard, but at the time it was terrifying. The Master is also back for the 2nd story in a row. He feels a bit superfluous to requirements. It is a good idea to have him working on the side of good for a change, but none of the Doctors believe him, and he inevitably goes back to just double-crossing everybody, until he is finally taken down by the Brigadier, of all people, which feels like a new role for the character. The real villain turns out to be Bruiser, played by Philip Latham, who is very convincing both as the genial Lord President and as the power-mad villain he eventually turns out to be. His long friendship with the Doctor could have been mentioned a bit more, but the fact that the character gets recast in every story means he's basically a different character every time, so his shift into villainy doesn't feel as out of the blue as it could have done otherwise. His final fate is chillingly ironic, gaining immortality but only as a living statue, able to see and feel but unable to move for the rest of time, which certainly gave me a few nightmares back in the day. And there's also a Deus Ex Machina appearance from Rassilon, who looks surprisingly similar to his comic appearance from a few years earlier. In this episode alone, we've already had the Game of Rassilon, the Tomb of Rassilon, the Harp of Rassilon, and the Coronet of Rassilon. So it only makes sense that we get to see the eyebrows of Rassilon and the funny hat of Rassilon. All the Doctors only come together in one brief scene at the end, which is a shame. More interaction between Davison and the old Doctors would definitely have been a good thing. But at the time, I was very satisfied getting to see all these classic characters for the very first time. It felt like the ultimate Doctor Who episode, and part of me still feels like that to this day. The DVD has more than 2 hours of extras, at least if you bought the special edition. This version has some improvements, turning the time scoops from black triangles into swirling vortexes, and improving the lightning effects in the chessboard scene, but the original still works fine. The Companions commentary is worth listening to. It's great to hear what Nicholas Courtney and Elizabeth Sladen thought of the show. Plus you get Carol Ann Ford talking about the differences between the new and the old show, and Mark Strickson giving more of a filmmaker's viewpoint. There's also a secret bonus commentary by David Tennant, Phil Collinson and Helen Rayner, none of whom worked on the story, but it's great to hear their thoughts as fans. It's a very entertaining listen and feels like a prototype for the Behind the Sofa features on the Blu-rays. The main documentary, A Celebration, is presented by Colin Baker and tells the story of how the Five Doctors came about, as well as footage of the celebration at Longleat. The Ties That Bind Us has Paul McGann, narrating a bunch of continuity references, with lots of clips from past stories. There's 18 minutes of studio footage from when they were filming the multi-Doctor scene, 6 minutes of outtakes with Doctors and Daleks all swearing, and a feature on special effects. There's also half an hour of clips from interview shows. You get the current TARDIS crew on Saturday Superstore, Davison and Richard Herndl on Blue Peter, Davison and Troughton on Breakfast Time, and Davison, Troughton and Pertwee on Nationwide. The old Doctors are far more chaotic than the current crew. Overall, it's a lot of fun, bringing back old Doctors, Companions and Monsters for a full-on nostalgia fest. It's not remotely deep or meaningful, but for its time, it's about as good as it could be. 8 out of 10. Next week, it's the start of season 21. I have a theory that this is where the show really started to go downhill, and it doesn't start to get good again until season 25, by which time the ratings were too low for it to survive. But we'll see if my rewatch bears that out over the coming months. So next Monday, it's on to Warriors of the Deep. Press subscribe to see what I think of that, and I'll see you next time.